Alright, and as I was splitting the video there, you can see that there's a bunch of larvae there that was produced by the queen. It actually finished while I had the camera off. Okay, so the last queen ability is the transfusion ability, which is basically a heal ability. It restores 125 health to a biological unit or structure. So the queen is basically, it's basically a medic that heals a bunch of damage all at once rather than over time. The only limitation to it is that it can't use it on itself. So if you have multiple queens, that's good, because then the queens can just heal each other. Okay, and now that's all of the Zerg ground units. Now we'll move on to the Zerg air units. The first is actually a weird unit from a unit design standpoint, and that's the Overlord. The Overlord is actually the Zerg's food supply unit. It's kind of like a Terran supply depot, except it's a unit and it can move around and it flies. The Overlord is an armored biological air unit. It cannot attack. Unlike StarCraft 1, there's been a few changes to it. It's not a detector anymore, so the Zerg don't have a cheap, limitless supply of detectors. Once you upgrade a hatchery to a lair, the Overlord gains an ability to create creep wherever it goes when it stands still. So I'll activate that now. And this is very handy because it allows Zerg to build in distant areas where they otherwise wouldn't be able to build. So let's stop that since it's noisy. And then the other new thing that the Overlord can do is that it can morph into an Overseer. And I'll get into the Overseer later. Next up is the Mutalisk, which is the Zerg's basic air attack unit. The Mutalisk is a light biological air unit, and it can attack both air and ground units and does normal damage. Something unique about the Mutalisk is that whenever it attacks a unit, its attacks bounce off and hit other units. Can't really see it right now since I'm attacking my own units. But if there were a bunch of enemy units, that means that whenever the Mutalisk strikes one unit, it'll bounce off and hit more units. So it's good against low HP units like Marines or Zerglings or anything like that, because it'll kill them quickly and efficiently. Moving on is the Corruptor. The Corruptor is a new Zerg air superiority unit. It's an armored biological air unit, and it can only attack other air units. Something very interesting about the Corruptor, though, is that when it attacks other air units, it does extra damage versus massive units. This is interesting because that means that the Corruptor is basically, not only is it a straight anti-air unit, it's also a hard counter to battle cruisers and carriers. So if anybody goes high-tech, high-tier units like battle cruisers or carriers, then a Zerg player is going to build Corruptors, since it does extra damage to massive units. Corruptors also have a special ability called Corruption. Ooh, that's really creative. Which covers a target unit in acidic spores, blah blah blah. I'm just reading the thing. But basically what it does is that it increases the damage that unit takes. So it's basically a special ability that aids in focus fire. Some things you could probably do with that is to cover battle cruisers and carriers and spores and use the Corruptor's extra damage versus massive units and take out carriers and battle cruisers pretty darn fast. The last special ability about the Corruptor is that it can morph into a Broodlord. And Broodlords are the Zerg's ground attack aircraft, basically. The Broodlord is an armored biological massive unit. It can only attack ground units. And the special thing about the Broodlord is that whenever it attacks ground units, it creates these little broodling guys. So, well, I'll just show you instead of trying to explain it. See, I'm telling it to attach that hatchery there. And what the Broodlord does is that it sends down these little broodlings who then attack what the Broodlord is telling them to attack. And broodlings are these little, they're basically kind of like Zerglings. So anyway, I'll stop before that hatchery dies. So that's a broodling. And last but not least is the Overseer. And this is basically the Zerg's intelligence unit. The Overseer, like I said before, it can be morphed from an Overlord. When it's morphed into an Overseer, it gains a detector ability, so it can see cloaked and brood units. It keeps its food supply, so it still gives the Zerg food supply. It's an armored biological air unit. It cannot attack, but it's got a few special abilities. The first special ability is the Changeling. And what the Changeling is, it's basically an intelligence unit. When you make the Overseer create one, it's this little blob thing. And whenever it comes in contact with the enemy, it morphs into the enemy's basic ground unit. Engaging. So in this case, it's the Protoss, so the Changeling will change into a Zealot.
It will be done. Engaging. It will be done.
So you can see I can scout the enemy, and the enemy doesn't know that that's a Changeling. It thinks it's a Zealot. Most human players would probably kill this Zealot since they can't control it, but this is a stupid, very easy computer, so it's not going to kill it. So anyway,
it will be done.
I'll just leave him over here. The next ability for the Overseer is the Contaminate ability. And what this does is that it contaminates an enemy structure. And basically what that means is that it stops the enemy structure from doing anything for 30 seconds. And that means that it can't train units, and that means that it can't research things. So it basically disables the enemy structure for 30 seconds. The last ability of the Overseer is the ability to create an infested Terran. The infested Terran is basically just a cannon fodder unit. You create it basically when you want some extra cannon fodder units to throw into battle. So anyway, that pretty much wraps up the Zerg units for StarCraft 2. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. Up next sometime I'll be doing a Protoss unit guide. So if you're looking forward to StarCraft 2 and you haven't gotten your hands on the beta, subscribe and check that out later. Thanks guys for watching, bye.